The views, comments, stories, and opinions shared within this podcast are my own or those of my guests, and in no way represent the views of the company or companies that I or we work for. All stories, events, and tales shared within this episode may or may not have happened in the manner in which they are told. They may or may not have even happened at all. The details have been changed to protect the innocent and the guilty alike. This is Squawk Ident.
You're listening to Squawk Ident, an aviation podcast dedicated to the journey and the challenges surrounding the life and career of Aviator Tony, his co-hosts, and his guests. Together, we will explore the many pathways to an aviation profession, the realities of what a professional aviator can expect in today's marketplace, and we share many stories along the way. I'm your host, Aviator Tony, an airline pilot currently flying for a legacy airline with close to 20 years on the flight line. This is episode 42 of Squawk Ident, recorded on the 21st of May, 2020, from the Aviator Sound Studios somewhere in Southern California. So whether you're driving to work, working from home, or taking a break from binge watching your favorite show, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
We've got a trip starting on the 23rd, which is Saturday. We're going to use that Dallas-Denver turn for training purposes. So your new sign-in looks like it's going to be 18:15 or 6:15 p.m. to deadhead to Tucson to work that return leg on the 24th.
Nice.
Do you need some training, Rob?
You know, you just got displaced
for training. That's awesome.
Heck yeah, dude, man.
Oh, so now I got to deadhead to Tucson Saturday night.
Oh, you got displaced so somebody else can do training.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then I work one leg back to Dallas the next day, and I'm done. That's my whole week.
Very nice. Very nice.
You come work corporate. That's what all your trips will look like.
Yeah.
Oh, are we recording? Oh, crap.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show. I would like to start off by taking a moment to recognize all of the frontline professionals out there. To everyone in North America and around the world that continue to brave the potential exposure of this CCP or COVID-19 virus, however you want to call it. You know, you're keeping the rest of us healthy and safe, and from all of us here at Squawk Ident Podcast, thank you for all that you do. I also wanted to start off the show today by again saying thank you to Captain Ryan Rosinski for joining me on episode 41. Hearing about his journey and the strategies he navigated in order to accomplish what he has was inspiring to hear. Since we had him on the show, I'm happy to report that he has been spending some priceless time with his family, towing their new camper trailer around the beautiful country and enjoying the star-filled skies above Boise. Thanks again, Ryan, for joining us on episode 41. On today's show, we will be discussing load factors and the outlook for pilots looking ahead to October 1st. The president doesn't seem concerned. Should we be? Also, with the reduction of flights throughout the country, the 5% increase in load factors by the TSA's report last week has started to become evident, with aircraft that are starting to become uncomfortably almost full. We will also explore, in the WTF segment, face mask shaming. Seriously? Yeah, seriously. There has also been some flight deck mask pushback. Why is that? We will discuss it. To help me navigate these topics, I am honored to be joined by a group of aviators that I have bribed generously to be on today's show. Did you guys get your Squawk Ident stimulus checks yet? I promise, they're in the mail. Joining us today, he is a DFW-based 737 pilot for Legacy Airlines. He is a former international and professional racquetball champion, a member of the 9G Club, a former F-111 crew chief, an AMP and avionics tech, an RC aircraft commander, and a pickleball master. Joining us from his Flower Mound, Texas home, help me in welcoming back to the show, Rob D. Rob, what's up?
Hey, what's up? It's good to be back. Good to be back on the show. Look forward to it.
Heck yeah, man. So have you been flying at all?
Not very much. Happy to say it's been a nice break from the high-paced, high-tempo operation that we experienced up to, I guess, March, April timeframe. But basically, my month has been consisted of weekend trips. Just did like 4 legs last weekend, and it's been nice. It's actually, I look forward to going to work and enjoying the time that I'm there, and enjoying all the time I get to spend at home with my family as well. So it's been really, really nice.
I couldn't agree with you more. Had a discussion recently with a friend of mine that, growing up as a young person, I would watch reruns of Leave It to Beaver and the Brady Bunch and all these shows that were really huge in the late 60s, 70s, and early 80s that really kind of focused on family and, doing the right thing and, tell me about it, Beav, And
exactly.
here we are, we're in this fast-paced environment in a world filled with technology and everything needs to be done yesterday. No time to sleep. Everybody's got to work. Who's raising the kids? Nobody is. It's the TV and the internet and the school system, that's not their job. And so here we are hitting rewind. And it really has been kind of I hate to say a good thing, but it's kind of been a blessing to kind of reconnect with our immediate families and our friends and reaching out to people that we maybe haven't talked to in a while and say, hey man, how things are going.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's been nice. I kind of look at it as a reset from our lifestyle. This is where now kind of we should be for for getting back to family time and enjoying each other's company and everything. My daughter's turning 15 here soon. Actually, I'm sorry, my youngest daughter's going to turn 14 and my oldest daughter's going to turn 15 here pretty soon. So they're going to be flying through those teenage years pretty soon, and before you know it, we're going to be empty nesters.
Yeah, you got 4 years, 5 years left maximum. Yeah.
And exactly. And 15 years have gone by just like that.
Well, you've been busy.
So those 5 years. Exactly.
Now that things have slowed down. And I've also seen that with conversations with fellow pilots on the flight deck that they're like, oh God, it's got a 2-leg day today? Seriously?
Yeah.
Like,
right.
wait a minute.
I know.
So yeah, it's definitely nice to catch up. Also joining us on the show today is another exceptional aviator. He is a professional CFI, II, MEI flight instructor, a former Embraer 145 airline pilot, a King Air instructor, and a corporate pilot as well. Today, he is happily taking a break from his role as stay-at-home educator in order to join us on today's conversation. From his comfy institution of learning, from somewhere in San Diego, California, please help me in welcoming back to the show, Captain Roger. Captain, how you doing?
I'm doing all right, Tony. It's great to be back. It's been a few weeks. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for being here. So,
absolutely.
Last time we spoke, you were dealing with, the airplanes getting a little bit of maintenance done. I don't think I'm going to be flying much. Have you had that opportunity yet to get out there and get in the air?
I have. We did have some work done on the airplane, and then we actually flew the owner again just a couple weekends ago and brought them back. So I actually had a 4-day trip. There's not a lot of work involved in the 4-day trip. Moved the airplane around, had the plane cleaned, detailed, actually sanitized, which is something a little bit new in this day and age, but thoroughly cleaned. And as long with the exterior wash, so it was nice and shiny.
Oh yeah!
For the first time in 3 months, when the principal came back and rode on it, and then we brought them back. So it was actually a 4-day trip, but we only flew 3 legs, 2 of which were less than 200 miles long. So
nice quick flights, but good to keep, your currency and all that related technical stuff
because
up,
we don't fly as much as you guys at the airlines, and so I think Rob and I had talked about it a few episodes ago, and about how he was talking about currency. And for the first time, it was like, yeah, we don't really worry about that. But for the first time, it was something that was creeping up into something that you kind of had to think about. And actually, we probably need to. I was actually just running the numbers just the other day. I think we're going to fly again sometime soon, but both of us need to get one more landing in the next, I think, 3 weeks. We got 3 weeks to get each of us to do a landing in order to keep our currency going. So
if you're getting really kind of tight on that currency and you need to get it done, does the owner just say, okay, take the airplane up, go do a couple full stops and you're good to go? Or are you kind of at the mercy?
I'm sure the owner would be good with that. It's not something, honestly, we still got 3 weeks even now, and I don't think it's become an issue, but it's never been an issue before. So it's kind of a, unknown territory in terms of what would happen. But if we had to say, hey, we got to go up and we got to do a couple takeoffs and landings just to have currency, I don't think that's going to be too much of an issue.
Yeah. Well, that's great. And I'm glad you're flying. Hopefully in the next few weeks, you're going to get up and in the air quite a bit more, because I know I've been missing it, and I've been flying a pretty full schedule. It doesn't seem like I'm really away from the game, but April was definitely nice for all of us, I think. Just really nice to be back in the air after having pretty much the whole month of April off. And I can tell you that, even being up in the air, flying a trip that was completely cut apart by crew scheduling because of rescheduling and cancellations and rebookings of flights. And I ended up doing an overnight in St. Louis. And it was a short overnight, but, we got to the hotel and it was like 10 o'clock at night. I only had about 11 hours of rest. So I had just enough time to maybe grab a quick bite to eat and get cleaned up and get ready for the next day. And we got to the hotel and they're like, there's no food available. We have some vending machines with crackers and things, and we have some microwavable things if you would like to purchase them. There's really nothing around because we're at the airport hotel. There's nothing around really that's open, only drive through, and we don't really have a way to get you there. So unfortunately, sorry. But we have beers for $5.
The essentials, right?
Yeah, short overnight.
Sounds like pilot food to me.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't.
Beer and pizza.
Yeah. So that was kind of tough. And then the next morning, I made the coffee in the room, went downstairs, and I thought, well, I'll grab a quick bite to eat, because coffee without breakfast is kind of tough for me. So we get to the airport, go through. There's very little people there. Not as deserted as it was weeks ago, but very little people there. We get through security, and I'm looking around, and I realize there's not one food establishment open except for Starbucks. And the line for Starbucks was about 30 people deep with 2 employees working, so it wasn't moving very fast. And I took a quick glance in the case to see, well, maybe I'll pick up something. The only thing they were serving was oatmeal. And nothing wrong with oatmeal, but I wasn't going to wait 20 minutes in line and cut my pre-flight time short so that I can get some oatmeal from Starbucks. And then we get on the plane, you think, well, usually in the morning at Legacy Airlines, they serve us some kind of breakfast, whether that's cereal or oatmeal or, a breakfast omelet, something. Nope. Nothing. So I ended up, I think we had about an hour sit in Phoenix, which is not long at all. And I was able to grab something there. They had 2 establishments open in the terminal and 0 establishments open outside of security. So it was a chicken sandwich for me. And off we went to San Antonio. And San Antonio is under their partial opening. Though the gym was closed, the pool was open. They limited it to 10 guests only. So 10 people could be at the pool at any given time, which made sense. It wasn't a very big place. But their lounge was open for business. You could dine in. They had social distancing procedures in effect, which meant that the tables were spread very far apart. The sofa area, or the cushions that you can sit on traditionally in a lounge or bar or to socialize, were all roped off or blocked off with signs indicating that they're not in use. But you could still order at the counter. They had a laminated menu that you could look at. And I was able to order some food and a good local IPA, and I got to sit down and was joined by my captain, who sat across the table from me, which they were kind of a longer table than you would normally expect. So they had us sitting lengthwise, far enough apart to where we weren't as close to each other as you normally would expect in a restaurant or bar. And we got to have a meal together. I mean, I sit next to this gentleman in the cockpit a few feet away, if that, for the past few days. So, to share a meal together was nice. And we kind of stopped and said, wow, this is weird. You never really think about it until it's taken away. And then when you get it back, it's like, wow, we're actually having a beer together. And I'm not sitting in my hotel room.
What hotel did you stay at?
That's a good question. It was close to the
Crown
airport. No.
Crown Plaza?
It wasn't the Plaza, but I will tell you.
Because I was there a few weeks ago too, and it was the first day that they opened up the restaurant, and I was the only one down there, and it was awesome. I mean, it was so invigorating just to be in a restaurant in a hotel.
Yeah.
That was open.
We stayed at the Hilton
service,
Yeah, the Hilton San Antonio Airport, which, I mean, there's not really much going on around the hotel, but considering the situation, I mean, it was quite nice.
Yeah.
The service was not the normal service that you would expect. There was one bartender / everything else person working there, and there was a couple business people down there having discussions and whatnot. But yeah, it was just some kind of glimpse of normalcy. So it was nice.
It's good to see.
Yeah,
good to hear.
And so, Rob, you've been flying a little bit on the weekends, and did you say you were in San Antonio last week, or?
Well, I was just checking my schedule here because I haven't been flying that much, so some of my flying has kind of been forgotten already. I was in San Antonio on the night of the 3rd, and that trip was literally one deadhead to San Antonio, spend the night, and then work the flight back to Dallas, and then I was done. So that was a great flight. That was a great trip because literally gone like 12 hours, and quick and easy.
Yep.
So that was the first trip that I had with an overnight with the phase 1 reopening of the Texas area. So the governor opened up stuff in Texas, and the restaurant had just opened that either that weekend or that day.
Mm-hmm.
So very similar to your situation, just like we talked about. I was the only one down there. There was nobody else around. One server that served me, so reduced staff, and sat down, had a burger, some fries, and I don't drink too much beer. I just had a soda, and I was like, "This is great, man." I mean, I've been missing just little things like this on trips. Everything's been closed up until now. Bringing your own food kind of thing, and since it was such a short trip, I didn't bring any food at all. So that one overnight was a nice sit down burger dinner, was great. So came home on Monday on that trip. I think I was home by like 9:30 in the morning. And then last weekend, actually not last weekend, the weekend before, on the 9th, May 9th, I had a busted up trip again from training. So I was originally supposed to fly a 2-day trip. Supposed to go to Las Vegas, come back to Dallas, and then go to the overnight in Tampa. Well, training called up and said, "Hey, we're going to use your Las Vegas trip as IOE, as training." And so all you have to do is come in for Tampa. And so I came in for Tampa, the Tampa flight. I had to be there at 6:00 at night. So flew to Tampa, spent the night, and then returned Tampa back to Dallas. I was on the ground by like 1:30 in the afternoon. And so that was a great trip there.
Yeah.
that was really uneventful. I don't remember what the loads were on those trips, but I think I remember seeing numbers in the high 90s,
That's good.
maybe close to 100. Um, and then so that was pretty much uneventful.
Yeah.
Everybody was wearing their masks, and
Yeah.
flight attendants were great. So it was pretty quick, pretty easy, uneventful. Nothing really to share there. Just nice to get out there and fly. This past weekend, I did get displaced again. For IOE seems to be a common thread here. So all I had to do was a Burbank turn, and then the next day I got called in to do a maintenance flight. We ferried a flight from Dallas to Tulsa,
Oh,
and then turned around, walked right across the ramp, hopped into another empty 737, and ferried that airplane from Tulsa back to Dallas. So 2 empty flights. It was just me and the captain. It was really, really nice to just hop in the airplane, turn it on, start it up, and push back. Quick flight. I mean, that plane climbed like a rocket ship. It was awesome. Usually, I think I talked about this before. Usually, when we hit the acceleration altitude and retract the flaps and everything like that, the plane goes the automatic. The thrust goes into like a climb mode
Sure.
setting. Well, because we were so light, the climb thrust setting was higher than the actual takeoff setting. So you experience an actual acceleration,
wow.
and increase in thrust. And so if you're mentally not ready for it, you're kind of like, whoa, did we just lose an engine? Did it just go to full power or something like that? And like, well, no, it's just climb mode. So that was pretty neat. So we got up to, I think we got up above 22,000 feet on the outbound and the inbound. So we got up to altitude really quick, and then 330 knots or so fast, right up to the barber pole, get there as quickly as possible. Of course, there's not a lot of air traffic up there. So clear direct to the field, and descend at pilot's discretion, so just program the FMS to do its planned descent and just let the plane do its thing, which is the way the whole thing was designed, So we were in a north flow at Dallas, north flow in Tulsa. So, took off north, landed north, straight in really quick. So that was neat. But on the return flight, it was kind of neat because first time doing this for the company, we had to park the airplane at the maintenance hangar and in Dallas. And for some reason, and I think it had to do with our flight number, ATC knew that we were going there. So they actually gave us a reroute en route with a new arrival into Dallas, which put us on the west side, north flow.
Yeah.
And right when we checked in with the tower, they're like, "Hey, you guys parking at the maintenance hangar?" We're like, "Yes, sir, west side." And they're like, "Okay, clear to land, left turn off, contact ground." I don't even contact ground, just taxi at your discretion to the hangar. We're like, okay.
Was your flight number different than usual on that maintenance flight?
It was.
Yeah.
It was. It started with a 9.
Yeah.
I think it was a 99 or 98 number.
9800 usually,
So,
yeah. Yeah, and you mentioned, thank you for that story, because you've mentioned a couple things that I don't think we've ever really talked about in the past on Squawk Ident, and let's go ahead and dive into it. So you mentioned the reduced takeoff. So for those listeners that may not be in the industry, or they're still working in GA and haven't got into, a jet takeoff settings and FADEX and things like that. So when you are a fully loaded aircraft, the aircraft, it's not like a piston-powered airplane where you just go, mixtures, props, and, throttles full forward, let's just go, maximum power, right? We have jet engines, and if we don't have to run them at max power, it significantly reduces wear and tear on the engine to take off at a reduced thrust setting. So these calculations are performed usually either through dispatch. Then when they calculate your anticipated takeoff weight, what they do is they take the zero fuel weight of the aircraft. That's the weight of the aircraft. with all the passengers and cargo and everything on there with no fuel on. Then they figure out how much fuel you need to get your destination legally. And then they subtract your taxi out fuel time. So if it takes you 20 minutes on estimation to go from the gate to the threshold of the runway, it's a 20-minute taxi. JFK, I've seen them as long as 45 minutes. On average, they're about 5 to 10 minutes, especially at an outstation, to get you from the gate to the threshold of the runway. So they subtract that fuel. It's very accurate. They calculate what your anticipated takeoff fuel is going to be, the weight of the aircraft at takeoff, and they go, okay, if the aircraft weighs this much at takeoff, you don't need 100%, 90%, sometimes not even 85% power. I mean, you could be at a drastically lower power setting for takeoff. And these are all calculations that are performed usually through dispatch, performance, tech ops, what have you. The numbers are run in a computer, and then they give you a preliminary assessment of the maximum weight that you can be at to take off on that runway for runway limits, for climb limits, or for performance limits, or even landing limits. So maybe you're too heavy when you land, so you can't take all the fuel that you would like to take, so you might have to take a little less fuel and plan accordingly. So you were taking off on an empty airplane. So when you leveled off, theoretically, you're kind of bringing the nose over after you've made that requirement, the restriction of, clearing an obstacle at the end of the runway, however many feet it is. I forget the exact verbiage of that.
Right.
But there's a calculation that the FAA has set in place. Roger's telling me, is it 800?
35 feet.
35 feet over the end
35
of
feet over the end of the
threshold.
Yeah, so there you go. So as long as you can make these climb gradients, climb restrictions, then you can go usually at acceleration altitude, normally about 1,000 feet over the ground, depending on the airport and the terrain around there. You start to nose the aircraft over, and you go from the takeoff thrust setting to the climb thrust setting. And in your case, the climb thrust setting was greater than the takeoff thrust setting.
It was.
And you get a little bit of a boost in the air, close to the ground.
Yep.
So that's just a cool, super uber cool thing for us aviation geeks to kind of hear. And
yeah, it's pretty neat. So just real quick then, let's talk, maybe we can dive into a little bit deeper on that real quick. And Roger, chime in with your aircraft performance stuff too. Like the 737 has 4 thrust ratings for takeoff, and then we can further reduce those 4 thrust ratings even further with temperatures. So ours is starts off with 22,000 pound thrust rating, 24,000 pound, 26,000 pound, and a 27,000 pound thrust rating. So 27 is our maximum, and then we can reduce those each one of those thrust ratings with a temperature even more. So that's what we usually do. What's the Airbus? How's the Airbus do? They have like the Embraer where they have TO1 kind of
exactly.
thing.
Airbus logic, it's a lot more, I'd say, calculated for you. So when you enter into your takeoff performance page in the FMS system, in the FMGC, so you put in what your zero fuel weight is. You put in the outside air temperature. It does a couple calculations. It then grabs the numbers that dispatcher calculated for you dependent upon that runway. It uploads that to your takeoff performance page. It gives you the V speeds, and it gives you either TO toga takeoff, which would be maximum power takeoff, depending on the variant of engine and the variant of aircraft that you're flying, whether that's a 319, a 320, 321, 321 with either the IAE engines, or 321 with the CFM engines, or the 321 with the NEO, the new engine model there. So dependent on that information, you can either take off with toga thrust, with whatever percentage of N1 that's going to give you, or you can take off with what they call flex thrust. And the flex thrust, what it does is you put in a temperature. So let's say the temperature you put in there is 64 degrees of temperature. So that engine will take off at a reduced power setting as if the outside air temperature was at 64 degrees. Okay,
Right.
so which is well above. So if it's that hot, kind of like in GA, when you have to figure out what your
Density, altitude,
density,
kind
thank
of
you.
thing is.
When you have to, kind of like in
Yeah.
GA, when you have to figure out your density altitude, it's the same exact concept. So the engine will produce a reduced power setting as if the outside air temperature was that, whatever you put in there.
Right, exactly.
Sometimes it's
Yeah.
kind of low. It's like 35 degrees, 30,
Right.
whatever, centigrade, whatever. And sometimes it's much higher. So
Yeah.
it all just depends on what that particular engine manufacturer says that 100% at standard temperature for that engine power setting is versus how much can we reduce it. So they're
Yeah, all in the interest of conserving gas.
conserving
and
the
this-
engine.
and engine and gas.
yeah,
the
engine life.
engine's a wear cycle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yep. Roger, what's your airplane do?
Magic.
Nice. I like that.
So, I mean, there's
Them.
obviously we don't have dispatch or anything, so we don't have numbers that are calculated for us. However, the airplanes, I'd have to go back for the older ones, but the ones that fly now, they do everything for you. Specifically, when we're talking about the 7X, much like you guys, we have an entire flight management system, and it asks for all kinds of information. And then once that's all plugged in, it will allow you to compute it, and it populates everything for you. It'll calculate your N1 for takeoff settings, basically giving you the minimum amount of thrust you need in order to meet performance specifications. I'm not going to lie, what exactly the different modes are, I don't even remember I don't remember forgetting it. I'm not sure that was something that we actually ever covered. You plug this into the computer. I mean, we basically have a mouse. We fly the airplane with a mouse and a joystick, and we plug everything in. It spits it out, and we have a detent. And actually, the 7X actually is all the way forward. There isn't an extra, engine failure. Because it will actually kick you into the higher. If in case you had an engine failure, it'll kick into the higher thrust rating for you.
Right.
So you just push the thrust levers all the way forward, and you let it do its thing. And
it sounds like you have like a electronic version of the QRH, not QRH, performance. We call it QRH.
Yeah, performance manual or
yeah.
Everything
version.
We have the entire performance is loaded on all those parameters are loaded within the computers.
And then that
hundreds
spits
of
out
computers.
your thrust ratings and V speeds and flap
and
settings.
It populates it for you on the PF on both pilots' PFDs.
Yeah.
And and this was kind of one of Dassault's things, was to make it as pilot friendly as possible, which is good. And you could spend an entire episode, arguing on how it's bad also. But yeah, we push those thrust levers all the way forward. And then when we get up to, you guys were talking about, acceleration height or takeoff safety altitude or different, ways of saying the same thing.
Third segment climb.
Fourth.
I forgot all that. Just kidding.
So once you basically get to your fourth segment, after your fourth segment climb, you can put it in, and you go into any other mode other than takeoff. It will take you out of takeoff mode and put you in the climb mode, depending on exactly what you've selected. But everything's very automated.
Yeah.
Nice.
We plug it in, it spits it back out. We have all the V speeds populated on the PFD right there for us, as well as the N1 bug and number, which then is part of power set. That's supposed to be one of those things you verify.
Yeah.
Cool.
It really is a testament to how far we've come, because even back in our regional days, all three of us have flown the Embraer 145, and it was the same thing there. The FADEC would calculate as long as you're, if you were in the reduced, the Alt-TO 1 takeoff or Alt-TO reduced setting for takeoff, if the FADEC calculated, I don't know how many milliseconds difference between the two engines, that would indicate that you had an engine failure, the FADEC would automatically put you in a TO or TO reserve or whatever, whatever aircraft you were flying, which model FADEC you had. So the aircraft did, like Roger's aircraft is doing, that he's currently flying, the aircraft did everything for you. But as a kind of memory item, we were always trained, even though you were in the reduced power setting detent, you always push it forward. Even though you technically didn't have to do that because the FADEC should do it for you. On the Airbus, at least at Legacy Airlines, they've taught us a couple things with the go-around procedures. On a normal go-around, not a single engine, but a normal go-around, if you go into go-around, what triggers not only the navigation system, but also the engine parameters, the climb settings with auto thrust and whatnot, is you push it into the toga detent, the takeoff and go-around detent. Then the navigation will automatically segment everything into the missed approach procedure that you have programmed in the flight guidance computer. Also, you'll have your maximum thrust. Now, on the Airbus, they teach us that you can, at the option of the pilot or the captain or the pilot flying, however you want to divvy it up, you can do what they call a soft go-around. So you put it in the detent, that triggers the navigation, that triggers the max thrust and the profile for a go-around. You run through your procedures, all right, go around toga, go around flaps, positive rate, gear up, and so on and so forth. And then while that's happening, the pilot flying can go toga and then immediately back to the climb detent. That way, the engine's not at 100 or more percent N1 for a very long period of time. Because if you're in the air, you haven't touched down, and terrain's not an issue, weather's not an issue, performance of the engines are not an issue, why not perform a soft go-around? So there are techniques that we're using. I don't know, is it the same on the 7.3 that you do a soft go-around technique?
So we have a very similar, operation. Yeah, when we select go around on the toga buttons, one click will give us the soft go around mode. In other words, just a regular go around thrust setting, and it'll also sequence into our missed approach. And if we do have an engine failure, it'll bring up the engine failure procedure on the navigation, which you actually have to activate. So that's kind of nice. And if you click the go around buttons twice, it'll give you max go around. So if you're in one of those high altitude airports, you'll get your max thrust there. So
so your go around buttons are actually on your thrust lever quadrant on the sides, correct? So when you do a go around,
it's actually in the front.
In the front
of
Okay.
Hold on, let me make sure. It's in front of the throttle quadrant. Getting a little dyslexic learning here from all the other airplanes, but it's in the front of the throttle quadrant. So right in front of the actual knobs on top of the throttle, in front, they're in front. So you can press either one, and they both work the same way.
Okay.
I was thinking the auto throttle disconnects are
on the sides.
Side.
Okay, yeah. The Airbus that we have auto throttle disconnect on the sides. We don't have a button in the front.
Right, but on the 145, they're on the sides.
Right.
So there was a lot of negative transfer learning there at one time.
Yes.
So go around, click, and the throttle would kick off, and you're like pulling back, nothing's happening, speed's bleeding off. You're like, why is this thing not sequencing? Push this thing all the way forward, and then it come all, nothing would happen. You're like,
I don't know of anyone that is transitioning from either GA to a turboprop or a jet on a regional, or anyone also going from a regional environment into a legacy environment or a major airline environment with either a heavy aircraft or a narrow body aircraft that doesn't have a few months of those kind of anxiety-ridden dreams where they can hear all of the alarms and bells and whistles on that new aircraft that they're running up. Pull up, terrain, traffic.
Well, I think I shared it with you guys a couple segments ago, and since we're already talking about it, it's kind of funny just to bring it back up. So when I was the check airman on the 175, I had a student that flew legacies in corporate. So it's basically the 145, toga buttons on the throttles were, on the side. Well, on the 175, that is the auto throttle disconnect. And the go around buttons are actually behind the thrust levers. So if you want to go around, you just hit the little button behind it, and the thrust levers would auto throttle would go up. Well, we actually had I was training the student, and or they were my student, IOE student.
Sure.
They were already been trained. But anyway, we had a go around scenario, and so we made the call out. All right, let's go around. All right, go around. Well, instead of selecting the go around buttons, they selected the auto throttle disconnects. So the throttles stayed right where they were, and there was yelling throttle, throttle, throttle. And I looked over. I'm like, I'm getting ready. I just wanted to see what would happen. Let's see if they can recover. It's not my aircraft yet. We haven't lost much airspeed, but they're pitching for, the 10 degrees, and now I start to see the airspeed bleed off. I'm like, all right, hey man, you got to hit the go around buttons, and right now, they're shell shocked. They're like, what's going on? Why isn't this thing not doing anything? And then I'm like, all right, my aircraft. So then I just shove it full forward, hit the go around buttons.
Yeah.
And then I didn't hit the throttle buttons yet because I wanted them to, audibly and acknowledge what that, that warning was, that audible warning was, so that they could learn from it. And I'll just let it go, throttle, throttle. I'm like, you hear that? And he's like, yeah, throttle. And he's like, oh, did I just hit the throttle disconnect? Yes, you did.
Yeah.
That's why nothing happened. Yeah. And he's like, oh, damn it.
A classic example of the law of primacy, ladies and gentlemen. So the law of primacy states that what you learn first will be the go-to reaction muscle memory that you will enable under a stressful workload, because that's the first thing that you've learned. And when you transition from one aircraft to another, one checklist to another, you'll find yourself, when you're tired, when you're under a tremendous amount of stress, which us aviators are immune to, right? Then you will go to the first thing you learned, the law of primacy. That's why you don't have to be perfect from the get-go, but it's always important to get those good habits, get those positive learning right away at the beginning. Learn it right the first time, because even though you can adjust and learn the procedure later on down the road, which to a certain degree is a normal way of learning, you are always going to go to that law of primacy subconsciously in a subliminal way. And that's exactly what you're describing, is that your student on IOE, which was coming out to the line, who had already been typed in the aircraft, had positively shown that they could, navigate the aircraft. How many go-rounds do you do in the simulator? I mean, come on. But in the real life environment, you got millions of more of data points that are coming at you of what's going on in your environment. So the stress level is much higher in real life than in the simulator. And that law of primacy kicked in from the previous aircraft that they flew. So that's a great story and a great example.
Yep.
So thank you.
So that's my WTF story, by the way, for the end of the show.
WTF. Yes. So speaking of WTF, a lot of these airports that we're going to, that Rob and I are going out. Rob's out of DFW. I'm going in and out of Los Angeles, and coming in through the employee portal. You have to swipe your, what they call a SIDA badge, or the airport identification badge, which is different than a company ID. And you get access to park in employee parking lots and ramp areas that normally most pilots or employees don't have access to. So because that's your home base and you've taken the course and you've been security background checked through the authority there. But they're having effective, about a couple weeks ago, temperature checks. Not random, 100% temperature checks. They've adjusted where the employee drop-off is. There are people there that are scanning your temperature with one of those infrared thermometers, which are in extremely high demand right now as well. And you go through the portal. Now, what I find a little bit interesting is all airport employees and flight attendants have to have a 100% scan of their temperature as they enter the airport. And if their temperature is above 100.1, they are then subject to further screening. And we've talked about this a little bit on the show previously. But pilots, it's optional, right? And I don't necessarily agree with this. Why am I optional and they're not? Is it because they're closer in contact with the public than I am, because I'm in the flight deck and I can maintain my social distancing while I'm in the terminal, but I'm not really in the back of the airplane? Is that why? I don't know. But I've always volunteered. Go in, they beep beep, good to go, Cap. Thanks. See ya. And now, just yesterday, Legacy Airlines announced that they're going to be doing these temperature checks through the KCM portals at airports in Phoenix and in Philadelphia. And again, if you have over 100, I believe it's 101 or 104, 100.4. If you have more than 100.4, you will then be subject to additional screening where they're going to ask you, they're going to give you some time to kind of cool down in case you were running from the bus or whatever, and see if the reading was accurate or not. And they're going to hit you again with this temperature check. So there's a lot more going on, and this might be something that's going to last for a long time. And I could totally see this going on for years, where we're going to have these temperature checks. Again, in these scenarios, it's optional for the pilots. So what do you think, guys? Should pilots have to do this temperature check? And is it a good thing? What do you think?
So when you're talking about them taking checks at the KCM points in Phoenix and Philly, I think you had said that's an optional thing for the pilots, and they're checking all the flight attendants. Is that for all the airlines, or is that specific to Legacy Airlines?
That's a good question. Because it is
I believe that's just to the company.
Just our company. It is a KCM checkpoint, and it is being conducted by. That's what it. Actually, no. I would say there must be a Legacy Airlines employee sitting at that KCM checkpoint, because it says effective immediately, Legacy Airlines will begin taking temperatures of all flight attendants entering the airport through the Philly and Phoenix KCM access points. Temperature checks for Legacy pilots are on a voluntary basis, but only at Philly and Phoenix.
So here's what I understand about that. So it's actually a company policy that or procedure that they're implementing right there. In Dallas, they actually have a portable table set up outside of KCM, and they're manned with in-flight personnel. And as you come into work, so that and you're entering through that particular KCM, the flight attendants have to go up there and get their temperatures checked and everything like that. So it's not being administered by the TSA, at least. Everywhere that I've seen it, I haven't really gone.
That would be hard.
Very many places. Yeah, I don't think it's TSA's job to do that.
And they would probably have a lot of pushback from that. But I think going back to your original question, I don't know if I necessarily agree with the pilots are able to exempt themselves, but I'm sure that you're 100% right. That in the end, we're supposed to all be socially distancing ourselves within the terminal, and once you get on the aircraft, you are by definition going to be socially distanced, just by lack of proximity and the flight deck door. Whereas the airport employees and the flight attendants are going to be actually not being able to distance themselves. And so I think that's why they're forcing that on them. Now, whether that's the right thing to do or not, well, you can argue one way or the other, I suppose. But I'm guessing that they're trying to come up with a little bit of a, how can we not infringe on everybody's rights, but try and do what we think is the right thing to make the passengers feel better as much as possible. And the people that are in contact with the passengers, we're going to make them do these temperature checks, because I think it all goes back to optics and in the media. If you can portray yourself in the media, here's all the things that we're doing, because this is now what almost every company on the planet's doing right now. Here's what we're doing to protect you, our customer. Please come back. And I think that the pilots are probably the thing that people are they're less likely to run into to the pilots themselves.
Yeah. And I don't know. I'm probably going way out on a limb by saying this too. And don't take it the wrong way. I just think from my experience in the industry, it seems like, the flight attendants, when it comes, and I hate to bring it up, pay purposes, calling in sick, or, attendance record, they have a little more, I don't know. They seem to have a little more. They get a little more trouble than the pilots do.
Yeah, well, they get the strikes against them, points. Some airlines are doing points. You get 3 points out or whatever it is, and not only that, when you're thinking about what I've heard is, well, I can't call in sick. I don't have any sick pay or sick time. I can't call in sick, and they're like sitting there sneezing, coughing. And this is much prior to our current situation globally here. But, you know, I
Yeah.
can't tell you how many times I've been in a situation and I witnessed a captain or somebody from the in-flight manager come in and remove a flight attendant from the
Yeah.
aircraft just prior to boarding
Yep.
because they're like, no, you can't continue.
Yeah,
You're not
exactly.
feeling well. You're taking medication that really you shouldn't be taking and flying at the same time. And they're like,
Yeah.
oh man, you know, really?
And not to say it's a problem, but you know, it's definitely something that happens. And you know, and on the other side of the token, you know, there are obviously some pilots that do that, even though we know by law, by the FARs, you're not supposed to, you know, come in and fly when you're sick. But
Right.
anyway, so it goes both ways, you know. But you know, one of the things we got from our Dallas team company about the face coverings.
Mhm.
Speaking about all this stuff, actually, you know, we're not actually talking about face coverings yet, but maybe I'll bring it up next time when we get into it. But
Oh, we'll be talking a
I'll
little bit
talk
about
about it.
that here in just a moment with cockpit
Yeah,
pushback.
yeah.
Yeah. So, and the other thing I wanted to mention before we do move on to that is on this trip that I did, I just got back from yesterday. It started out on day one, LA to Cabo, Cabo to LA, and then LA to St. Louis. That was the trip. We depart out of Los Angeles. Early morning. It's a beautiful morning. It was drizzling. It was beautiful marine layer coming in. Beautiful day to fly. Minimal people at the airport, but definitely way more people than I was used to seeing. And it was really a very rewarding thing to see that people are starting to fly again. Now, there's a debate that we can get into and have an entire other show about this, about, you know, should we really be flying if it's not absolutely essential? Unless you're an essential employee or someone visiting to go see a sick relative that might be the last time you see them in life. I mean, that is what the mass media would like us to believe, that those are the only people that should be flying right now. But that's not necessarily the case. People need to run businesses. They need to check on, you know, family, property, and for the most part, who's on vacation? No one really. But people are moving about the country. It is to the very core of who we are as human beings. We are very much mobile, and it's always been the case as far back as as you can think of as the dawn of man. So we've always been travelers. We've always done that. And it's so great to see it. And the TSA numbers that have been published every day, the TSA publishes the number of people that go through their virtual turnstiles, okay, through their checkpoints. And I was taking a look at this because I saw a report recently that shows a 5% uptick from week to week since this, what they call the zero line or the bottom line, where we had empty airports, as we were talking about weeks ago. And according to the TSA.gov, back in March 1st, okay, this is way before any of this was hitting the United States, they had 2,280 passengers go through TSA checkpoints on March 1st in one day. In 2019, they had 2,300,000. So the numbers were right there. I mean, they were within 20,000 people. As this pandemic news started to come out, by March 12th, they saw a pretty good reduction in the flying already. On March 12th of 2020, 1,788,000 passengers went through TSA turnstiles versus 2019, where they had 2,500,000. So a very big reduction. As the time went on, these numbers got very, very low. We're looking at the 30th of March, 154,000 passengers versus 2019, 2,300,000 passengers. So
Huge.
that 96% decrease in flying started on April 1st and continued on with a very low number. And I don't know if it's the lowest of it all, but from what I'm looking at, April 14th, 87,000 passengers flew in the United States through TSA checkpoints versus 2,200,000 in 2019. And we've seen a steady but slow increase. The numbers got back up starting around the 23rd of April at 111,000 passengers. And it continues to grow on the 8th of May, 215,000 passengers. And yesterday, the 20th, 230,000 passengers. So there's a graph that's out there floating around showing a steady increase. Well, who knows how accurate it is? We don't have enough data points to kind of say this is it. We're on the climb, we're on the mend. But we still see about 88% capacity or 88% loss of capacity through these TSA numbers. And this is not any specific airline. This is just in the United States, domestic travel passing through TSA, because international travel right now is still at a standstill. So what does this mean? Now, on that Cabo, I had zero people go from LA to Cabo. And then we did Cabo, actually it was Cabo to Phoenix. It was the return. We didn't go back to LA. And we had 7.
Wow.
You know?
Yeah.
Then Phoenix to St. Louis, we had, I believe it was 35. So it's still, we're talking social distancing, not a problem. Okay.
Yeah.
But we're also seeing particular flights, especially into our main hubs, that are at about 80 to 85% capacity, which is the maximum capacity that Legacy Airlines has vowed to have on their aircraft. Most of our listeners watch the media and have heard them say that at particular airlines out there on the system, they're going to sell less than 50% of the center seats. We're going to make sure that center seats are empty to practice social distancing throughout our flights so that people can feel confident in knowing that we're doing everything we can to provide a safe environment for them. Well, let's just do some quick math here. If 50% of an average aircraft's middle seats remain empty, and you average 6 seats per row, 3 aside, depending on the airplane. I understand that there are other aircraft that are more and less, but on average. And on average, you say about 26 to 30 rows. And if half of those middle seats, which there's 2 middle seats per row, you're still looking at 85% capacity. So your flight could be 85% full with half of those middle seats taken on your next flight. This is great from an aviator's perspective because we get paid when the airline does well, and we want the airline to do well. We've seen reports and read reports that 70% load factors are kind of the ground zero where the company can actually make money instead of losing money per flight. We're nowhere near that, but we're hovering somewhere around 33% from whatever report I read last night. 33% load capacity to normal to what it was in 2019, and it might take a long time to get back to those numbers. So this is a lot to take in, and these numbers, as any statistician would tell you, can be argued either way. How long will it take? No one can tell you. CNN doesn't know, Fox doesn't know, MSNBC doesn't. Nobody knows because we can't tell the future. We don't have that, but we do know that things are slowly moving forward.
Yeah, I think as the country opens up, the economy opens up, I think we're going to see things start to gradually, slowly return back to, well, not to normals, but the new normal. So whatever that is, I think also along those lines, I think, Roger, you mentioned this last time that, with the way things have been locked down and everything, we've had to reinvent the way we've done business. A lot of telecommuting and stuff like that, and I think that's probably going to be very popular also as things turn back to the new normal. So, airlines, will they be back to where they were this time last year? I think they will be. Not anytime soon. I think it's going to take a long time for it to get back there. And obviously, this is all just personal, speculation and stuff like that. Where will we be this time next year? Who knows? But personally guessing, I don't know. I'd love to see it at 100, 110% of where we were last year. That ain't gonna happen.
No.
I think maybe if we get to 75%, I think we've really done well, with this whole turnaround. And who knows if what's gonna happen is if there's a second wave. how's that going to affect? I mean, what are they going to do? They meaning, the government, the airlines and management, who knows how they're going to handle it. I don't think they're going to shut everything down again. That's one thing I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're going to probably, learn, use the lessons that they learned through this whole phase and try to come up with a more clever way to handle it. So
Yeah.
anyway, that's just my 2 cents.
NPR this morning, I was listening to their morning edition, and they were speaking about their Harvard University study yesterday that was published, indicated that if we would have locked down the country 2 weeks prior, 35,000 lives could have been saved. How they came up mathematically with this number, whatever formula that they used, I don't know. That's a great thing to hear. But also, I think there's really no way to kind of put a number on it. Sure, we could have reacted earlier, saved a lot of lives, but maybe even saved the economy a little bit from this by opening it up earlier as well. I mean, you can argue either way, but really we don't know. Hopefully, the continued growth of people getting jobs back will equate to a lot. And the airline really is a mirror image of how well the economy is doing, because airlines are really the lifeblood of our economy. People going business meetings are really our primary business. People that are traveling from point A to point B to do business. The average American household travels once a year on an airplane, usually on a family vacation or the holidays. So next year, the holidays, they're going to be a huge turning point to see if we're going to be bouncing back as quickly and how fast we're going to be bouncing back. Because if the average consumer is not working and they're going through their stockpile of money right now to pay for food and rent and whatnot, if they don't have the money next year, this could be an issue.
More in a bit. We'll be right back right after a word from our sponsors.
But moving on, I wanted to talk a little bit about what's going on with our flight releases. And I know that at the airline environment, we have a dispatcher that about an hour prior to the flight will send you a flight release via your electronic device. We've become a paperless operation over at Legacy Airlines, so there's no 15 to 30 page documentation that we have to print out on old dot matrix printers that take 20 minutes to do, and then the printer gets jammed, and then you curse at the printer at the gate, and those days are long gone. But so we get sent these documents, and at the bottom of the flight plan portion of the flight release, we have appended messages that basically there's something that we need to get out right now, information. We need you to follow these procedures. And until we can publish these new procedures in our permanent record of company operations manuals, you have to abide by them. And so there's 6 new appended messages tacked onto our flight releases or flight bulletins or flight releases. And one of them had me laughing. 6 of them are solely related to the COVID pandemic. And one of them that they felt that they had to type in there in every flight as the captain signs for the release and the FO signs fit for duty. There's a message saying, donning the oxygen mask. If wearing a face covering to combat the exposure to COVID-19, I have an issue with the way they wrote that, to ensure an acceptable seal between the pilot's face and the mask, pilots should pull down the face covering while donning the oxygen mask. Okay, so first off, for those pilots that elect to wear the face mask in the cockpit, good for you. I support you. That's great. I personally, unless I feel like the guy next to me is not looking too hot, and then that's a whole other can of worms. But I mean, I can't talk to ATC clearly. I have a hard time hearing what my captain's telling me. So I elect not to wear it in the flight deck, at least as of this point. That's what I've done. And 99.9% of the pilots out there, from what I understand, are not wearing it on the flight deck. We even have messages indicating that the captain should indicate to the number one flight attendant prior to the flight in their pre-flight briefing that we are not required to wear them in the flight deck. It is a choice, and we may not be wearing them when they come in to do a bathroom break, physiological break in flight, or just before we push off the gate or whatnot. Because we've had flight attendants that have written up pilots, well, I have to wear my mask and they're not wearing it. And we've had pro standards call quite a few pilots. I was talking to my captain just yesterday, and he says, yep, I got a phone call. And so now there's another message there, one of those messages. But this message, so we can't have beards because that doesn't create a seal and all that. But if we wear a surgical mask or a neoprene mask or whatever, charcoal mask, whatever you're wearing, N95 mask in the flight deck, which I don't know anybody that does, and now you have to don a oxygen mask. It has to be quick donning because, loss of rapid depressurization. Just a reminder, you got to take the mask off before you put the... Really, folks, do we have to have this in writing? I guess we have to have it in writing.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of, the blue book is kind of written blood. That's what they used to say at the Sandpiper, right?
Yeah.
Somebody did something stupid, so we have to put it in writing so that everybody else doesn't do something stupid. And I think this is kind of the same thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay, man, we all know that this mask was not designed to be worn with a COVID-19 mask under it. So take it off before you put it on. But, and then he's probably going to say, well, what if the oxygen mask is, contaminated with COVID-19? Well, I'd rather get COVID-19 and, live it out or recover from it on the ground rather than passing out, crashing the airplane, and, becoming a headline for CNN, and who knows how they'd spin that story,
COVID-19 takes down aircraft.
Exactly.
Roger, are you wearing a mask?
All 188 people died of COVID-19 because the pilot got it through his oxygen mask.
And although it took 3 days for him to realize, yeah, sure.
The numbers just bumped, just spiked. Oh my!
And
gosh.
Roger, what are you guys doing on your flight deck?
Nothing. I mean, this. I
love it.
We're doing nothing, and in the end, especially for all pilots, and we're a little bit different because it's always the same two people. Well, 95% of the same. 95% of the time, it's us two. We, Rob, you were talking about it. We ate together for the first time on the trip that I did a week and a half ago. The flight deck is going to be the least of our concerns, and then more from a realistic standpoint that you guys were just kind of touching on. I've been fortunate enough that I've never had an explosive decompression. But if you're coming down to that point, and now you also have to, it's going to be hard enough. I can only imagine, because I haven't experienced it, the mayhem that is going to be going on in that kind of scenario. And we talked about the time of useful consciousness for a 21-year-old naval aviator, and how ridiculous those numbers go as you get up in altitude, especially at the altitudes that we fly at, which are typically a little bit higher than even where you guys are at.
Yeah.
Where, we're in the low 40s. That's our typical. And so you've got a time of useful consciousness in a matter of probably maybe 10 seconds. And now you have to worry about this stupid, pointless mask. And I hate to put it like that, but in the end, it's a stupid and pointless mask when you are wearing it up on the flight deck. That is a far cry from having passengers and flight attendants. I make no mistake. This is a completely 180-degree polar opposite comparison here.
Yeah.
But wearing a mask on the flight deck is dumb.
It's like wearing a mask in your car when you're driving by yourself down the freeway and you see people wearing the mask in the car.
Again, I don't know if that's necessarily dumb. It's unnecessary.
It's unnecessary.
But when you're on a flight deck, it's borderline dumb.
Well, we call it safety issues. Safety issues.
And I'm just going to put it bluntly. It's foolish, because in that explosive decompression, as small of a probability that is, now you've got a mask on, and I believe that your odds of success are at least cut in half. Back to another statistic, and I just made that one up. But I think it's just kind of very unnecessary, borderline dumb.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, there's a whole bunch of scenarios that can be thrown out there, but just take, for instance, that Southwest it was Southwest Airlines over Yuma, right? Where they had the half of the passengers sucked out. So, I mean, that was a pretty serious incident. And it, I mean, I haven't really done very much had a lot of thought about it, but, they're pretty much having 3 or 4 emergencies all coupled into one. And one of them, also included an aircraft handling issue. Is the aircraft, handling characteristics changed? In addition to the engine failure, the engine, almost separation, vibration, fire, whatever, explosive decompression. You got a medical emergency, everything going on in the back, structural integrity. So you almost need every hands available up in that cockpit to maintain control of the aircraft. And now you got to worry about quick donning while taking off a mask.
Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's an extra step put in there that is unnecessary in my mind.
Yeah. And that's why we have this optional wearing the mask in the cockpit. And the unions out there are raising these safety issues. That's why, at least for legacy airlines, and I can't speak for any other airline out there, but I think they all pretty much are running around the same issue, is that it's an optional thing if someone wants to do it, but it creates a problem. And, we're going to talk a little bit about now in this WTF segment, mask shaming.
WTF.
And I witnessed this, had no idea this was going on. And I witnessed this week, mask shaming. And on that very first leg, we had an opportunity before we got to the airplane a little early. We had the opportunity to have a chat with the flight attendant, our number one flight attendant. And she told me a great story that left both the captain and I awestruck. So, and she tells it as she was flying a very long day. It was like 9 hours of flight time. It was a full 14-hour, 15-hour duty day, whatever her limit was for flying. And she was on the last leg, and they had a leg to go to the overnight, and then I think they were going to go on to do even one more. It was like a short hop or something, and she was legal for it. And she was like, I've been wearing this mask all day in the galley here. So she pulls the mask down from her nose to cover her mouth, but not her nose, so that she can just get some oxygen to the brain, because there is a increased portion of CO2 that you're inhaling because it's staying in the mask a little bit. So there's a little less oxygen concentration when you're wearing the mask versus when you're not wearing the mask. Obviously there's something going on there. So she lowered it to breathe through her nose, and one of the other flight attendants came up from the back and said, "You're not wearing your mask properly." She says, "I know." I said, "I've been wearing this thing for a long time. I want to just drop it for a while to get a breath. I'm not near anybody." So she's like, but you're, you might get COVID-19. And she says, "Listen, my husband is at risk. He's got diabetes and he's taking his medication, so he's at risk. I know that the mask that I wear is so that I protect others from getting COVID if I have asymptomatic contagiousness, okay, which I do not, okay? But if I did, nobody would know. I wouldn't know. If I'm asymptomatic and I don't have a fever, I don't have a cough, I don't have any symptoms, but I have it, no one would know. That's why I wear the mask." And she was trying to educate the other flight attendant that you wear the mask to protect those around you. You're not wearing it to protect yourself necessarily. Because, as we know, as we've watched this hundreds and thousands of reports, you can get it through your eyes, through your touch, through, whatever. So about 30 minutes into the flight, she gets a call from the flight deck, and it's the captain. And the captain says, "Listen, the other 3 flight attendants have talked to me, and they're worried that you're not wearing your mask properly. They feel that you're asymptomatic because you said that to them that you are asymptomatic and you have COVID-19. So when we land, I just want to let you know I'm going to have you removed from the flight." She's like, I'm not asymptomatic. I'm trying to just explain to her that if I was symptomatic, she's like, "Listen, my wife has cancer. She's going through chemo. I can't have anybody on my aircraft knowingly asymptomatic. So I'm going to have you removed. I'm sorry. It's nothing personal. She says, bullshit. She says, it is personal because otherwise, why did you mention your wife to me? So she's like, you know what? Fine. You want to have me removed? Have me removed. So they landed. They had her removed. She had, to go through the explanation to her in-flight manager, what happened, what was said. Know that she got to go home with pay for the rest of her trip. She didn't lose any pay for being removed off the flight, but it was a classic case of mask shaming. You're not wearing your mask properly. You said you were asymptomatic. What are you doing here? If I'm asymptomatic, how would I know? She said, but our jaws were dropped. We're like, shit, really? This is what's happening out there? And she's like, yes. Yeah. And it's not just me. So, and the company is not really asking many questions. They're just going, okay, go home with pay, but let's just remove you from the scenario. So if anybody points their finger at you and says, you're not wearing your mask properly, you're asymptomatic, I'm kicking you off the flight, just say, okay.
Yeah.
And enjoy your time off.
Yeah. Smile and enjoy pay. I had a small incident, and you just reminded me of it. I don't know if I talked about it last time, but mine had to do with the mask, obviously, since that's the topic and the WTF moment. So we got this company email that saying, hey, face covering requirements effective May 8th. And so I was like, okay, May 8th, I had a trip that day or whatever. I better wear my face mask. Well, I read the message carefully. And so I was like, okay, basically what it says is I have to wear it in these certain situations. And it says when on duty and unable to maintain at least 6 feet of distance between you and another person. That's what it says, right? So I was like, okay, I clear TSA, which I'm within 6 feet, face shield, whatever. So I wore the mask. Of course, you have to pull it down just to verify your identity or whatever.
So wait a minute.
Put it back on.
You're right. Let me pause you there for a moment. And I laughed at this too. So you go through KCM checkpoint, the known crew member portal for working crew members. And the first thing you do is you hand them your identification, your passport, what have you, and you swipe your little KCM badge, whatever you do.
Right. That you just touched.
And they just grabbed it from you, and maybe they're wearing gloves or not, whatever. And they didn't take the gloves off between the point where they touched your passport and the guy in front of you and the guy behind you. So thank you. That's another story. Now,
spread it, but go ahead.
Your photo comes up on their security page, and they verify your identity, that you've gone through all the security and you're good to go. You get the green light, you're cleared to go. But before they do, they say, please take off your mask, because they have to verify that you're more than just your eyes, right?
Yes,
so
exactly.
So now and there's supposed to be plexiglass between you and them, but they all do the same thing. They all put their head around the plexiglass to make sure they can see. So you're...
That's stupid.
It's
stupid.
Yes, but please, I apologize. I had to point that out. But
no, I know.
You had the mask on back after that.
So I put it back on, get my ID, whatever, clear clear TSA, and head out into the terminal. And as I'm walking around, I'm like, sorry, I can maintain 6 feet from passengers and other team members. So in the terminal, I take off my face mask and I continue walking to my gate. And I'm walking by passengers, and they've got their face masks on, and some of them do, some of them don't. But all the flight attendants, they're covered up. They've got them on. I mean, maybe 1 out of 10 didn't. But, and I think they probably read the same email that I did. But, as I'm walking by them, I'm smiling. Hey, how you doing?
They're like, I'm going to write him up.
On going. Yeah, exactly. You're getting that kind of daggers being thrown with their eyeballs, So I get to my gate area, and I got there probably 10 minutes early. And, I kind of stood around by myself, segregated from all the other people and everything like that. And the flight attendants were kind of congregated over in the corner and another, probably about 15, 20 feet away from me. And then, like casual, hey, they come walking over. Hey, are you working this flight? And I, watched them. I made sure they stay about 6 feet away from me. And I'm about 5'10", so I know if I fall down and I can hit them, then they'd be, close to about 6 feet. So if they're that far away, a little bit further away from me than what I can fall and hit them, then I know they're more than 6 feet.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, yeah. And so they started saying, hey, did you know you're supposed to wear your mask around now? And I was like, oh, we are? I was like, I read the email and it didn't say we have to at all times. Oh yeah, when you're at work and you're in uniform, you have to wear it. I was like, oh, well, let me read. I took out my iPad and I said, is this the email that we got? And she's like, yeah. I was like, well, let's read it together. She's like, okay. It says here, a face covering is required of all pilots when on duty. See, it says it right there. I was like, yeah, but you didn't read the rest of the sentence. And it says, and when able to maintain at least 6 feet between you and another person.
Yeah.
She's like,
Oh.
oh, that's awesome. So she's like, I'm taking this thing off. So we all just kind of stood there without our face mask, 6 feet apart, obviously.
Yeah.
And then as we boarded the airplane, but I think I maybe have, I wouldn't say educated, but opened somebody else's eyes to,
I'm all for wearing the
things like
mask
that.
when you're in public, simply because I've always believed from the beginning of this career that perception is everything. When I was fortunate enough to be in a role like a mentor role, whether that be at the airline or instructing or what have you, I always used to tell people, when you put your uniform on and you leave that hotel room door and you're walking in the hallway at the hotel, from that point on, you represent the company you work for. So everything you do, imagine that everyone that walks by you has their phone out and is broadcasting you live on YouTube or Facebook or something. Okay, so if you have that mentality, you're never going to get caught in a situation where someone can say you've negatively, shown us something. And what does that do? Forget about how it seems for anyone else. How does that protect you? I'm always looking to protect my certificate first. I always want to make sure I get to go home tonight first, safety-wise. Yes, I've got a plane full of passengers and people, and I got to follow protocol. But at the end of the day, I'm going to take care of me because I have responsibilities at home, and I'm going to take care of me. Then I'm going to take care of my crew, and I'm going to take care of my passengers, and safety is obviously the number one concern. I, too, would put the mask on. I'd go get a bite to eat. I'd sit down, take the mask off, eat, drink. If you have a Starbucks cup of coffee in your hand and you're walking around the terminal and you maintain 6 feet from people aren't going to question the fact that you got a mask on because you got a cup of coffee in your hand, right?
So that's the other thing that's kind of a decoy now.
Yep.
I think a lot of people are figuring out you walk around with a cup of coffee.
Yep.
You don't need to have your mask on because you're eating or drinking.
Now, if I don't have that, like you, I put the mask on and I was looking for it here a second ago. I actually have a little smiley face on my mask now. Don't ask me.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, actually, it's a big hit. So I got this mask that, company provides a paper mask, the surgical mask, and then a covering to make it look more professional. And I have a nice big red happy face smile on it. And so here I am walking around with this thing. And when I'm in the terminal, if I don't have a cup of coffee in my hand, because exactly what's going on, mask shaming. Oh, you're not wearing your mask.
Yeah.
And there's that meme that's gone around with the picture of a person wearing the mask up to their mouth, but not their nose is out. And then there's a drawing of a man wearing underwear with his member sticking out. And it's like, when you wear your mask like this, you might as well be walking around like this.
Exactly.
Everyone has seen this. Everyone has seen it.
Oh, man.
And so now it's like, you're not wearing your mask right. Do you walk around with your penis out of your underwear? Oh, you wear underwear?
Actually, I'm curious with Roger on your last trip. I guess I don't fully understand where, your plane is kept. Is it at an FBO or a hangar, or, some kind of services where they come out and, tug your plane out or whatever. But were the other employees around you that were working, helping you get the airplane out? If there were they wearing masks at all?
It depends where we were. kind of an answer to your first question, yeah, we mostly have the airplane taken care of for us. It gets pulled out. It's usually kept in a hangar. They tug it out and put it on the line so that we never push from a gate like you do it in airlines. We pull chocks, we flight it up, and then we'll taxi out. And all that's taken care of beforehand, before we arrive or before the passengers arrive. In terms of whether people were wearing masks, that depended on where we were. The first place where we were was a small town in East Texas, and no, nobody. I'm not sure if they'd ever heard of a mask out there on the line. We did eat dinner out there, and the waitress was wearing a mask, but the line people at the airport, nobody at the airport had been wearing a mask. And when we repoed the airplane to Austin, all of the line people were wearing a mask. I did not, kind of just what you were just talking about in terms of the 6 feet, because I kept my distance from everybody. I wasn't talking to anyone face to face. I elected to not wear a mask, but with consideration to those around me. And I kind of, going back to that mask shaming story with that flight attendant, I have several different feelings about it. First of all, good for her for trying to educate the general public. That's kind of been something that came up 6 weeks ago, and I said something about it.
Yeah.
But in the end, I rode. I had to take an airline flight, and out of respect for my fellow man, I wore my mask throughout the airport, and I also wore it for the entirety of 2 legs on the airplane, for leg 1 for the layover, which was only about an hour, and then for the 30-minute flight. And it gets uncomfortable after a little while. And I can only imagine that for those flight attendants that are wearing them for hours on end,
if you have glasses, it drives me nuts.
And yeah, I mean, I was dumb and I wore my glasses on that day.
Yeah.
And I wear my contacts when I work generally, but
I was going to say, contact lenses sometimes help.
They do. But the masks do create a little bit, they are uncomfortable. They do create some other problems with the glasses as well. I think it's,
for me, I have like progressive lenses because I'm getting old,
Oh yeah, so you need near and far.
Yes. So when I put on the mask, it changes the angle and the
so they don't even work
dimension that I look through my glasses. So the focal point is all jacked up, and I literally can't. If they're fogged up, number one, and when they're not fogged, I could barely see what I'm doing. It gives me a headache.
Well, you've read the company emails. The solution to that is to just readjust your mask.
Yeah, readjust the mask. I did. I just put it below.
Let your nose come out. Yeah.
You can only, but over, when you were talking about this flight attendant, I mean, what has she been on duty for 9 hours? I mean, can you imagine trying to wear a mask for 9 hours?
The story she told me, she was up all day, flying all day, basically working I forget the term she used, not a double, but she was working an extended shift of some kind, or the legal maximum you can fly. And she'd been wearing this thing all day long because it's been go, 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 which, their work rules are a little bit different than pilots now. And so I can only imagine you're wearing I barely wear that thing, from the hotel van to walk through the airport. A lot of it is perception, as I mentioned
ready
earlier.
To rip it off.
As soon as I get in the cockpit, that thing comes off. Or first I asked, my fellow pilot, I asked the captain, hey, you okay with that? And they're like, oh, yeah. So, I have it on for 20 minutes. And I'm done. And so I can only imagine with the healthcare workers, and they've got respirators on with, seals and face shields. And oh my God, there's a reason that the Thunderbirds and the Blue Angels are flying over hospitals all over the country to just salute the workers that they do. And it's a reason that I do my best to give them a big thank you at the beginning and the end of each show, because I can only imagine the sacrifice that they're doing just to keep us healthy and safe. And it's amazing.
Big sacrifice.
Yeah. But I also wanted to talk a little bit about what the future of air travel could be. And we talked about earlier, nobody has a crystal ball. Nobody really knows. But there are some actions that are happening here out in commercial aviation and airline environment that are really telling. Right now, Legacy has decided to retire the Airbus A330 the 7.5 and 7.6 fleet, and the Embraer 190 fleets. What that means is substantial vacancy and displacement bidding is going to be running over the next few weeks. And as a matter of fact, I believe tomorrow we're going to get the preliminary results, at least here at Legacy. Delta Airlines has also announced that the 777 fleet is being parked or retired, and is going to create a huge displacement. They've also announced that there's going to be the voluntary leave of absences, practice that we've been doing now for a few months at Legacy Airlines. And now Delta has announced that they will be exploring those avenues as well, all in an effort to prevent putting people on the street through furlough. I received an email just yesterday. I know Rob and I were talking about this earlier, that Legacy is going to be offering more voluntary leave of absences, early retirements, and whatnot for the month of July. So these procedures and these techniques of trying to minimize payroll during this crisis is working, and hopefully will translate into less pilots on the street. And our flight department at Legacy is by far one of the most professional, and I'd have to say best, that I've ever had to deal with. And in a letter from our chief pilot over in the Los Angeles area, he indicated in a recent email that the bid shows at Legacy that a net reduction of 1,677 pilot positions are going to happen between this summer and next summer. That is the number that doesn't take into account the normal age of attrition of 65 for mandatory retirements. Airlines are restructuring in the face of the diminished business opportunities and refocusing on core operations. That means that we'll see a realignment of our hubs to focus on providing the best opportunities for our customers in bases that we expect to recover the fastest. We're also working hard to keep leave options open through the coming months, so we can keep everyone on property that wants to stay. United announced earlier this month that it was suspending all of its long-haul flying from LAX and focusing that flying out of San Francisco. Delta had a bid that eliminates the 777 status, and as well of the MD-88 and 90 bid statuses. And it's dramatically reducing the 757 aircraft as well. Their pilot projections for next year call for a net reduction of 2,500 pilots. So between Delta, Legacy, and United, some of these other airlines, they're going to be smaller. It's going to be a smaller, tighter operation. They're going to have less flights flying in and out of particular hubs. They may have to expand certain hubs, but this is going to be the mother of all vacancy / displacement bids coming up.
Yeah, it is.
You know, and
Moab.
Yeah. So how this is going to happen? It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take months of restructuring and moving pieces around the board, but it's going to happen. And if Legacy can do without suspending or furloughing, that would be great. And I'm in the danger zone. I don't know, Rob, I think you're not.
Pretty close. I'm close. There was a union email that came out with the updated seniority list. I don't know if you had a chance to take a look at that.
No, not yet.
So it's quite interesting that I've got close to 2,000 people below me, according to that list. So and it included, I don't know if it included or did not include people on leaves and military leaves, but basically I it's about 2,000, give or take a couple hundred. But according to that list, I should be okay. But judging by the numbers that you were just talking about, where we're going to have 1,677 positions less than what we have. I think that is an actually refreshing number.
Yeah.
To say the least, because you look at other companies like United. I mean, I think they're in a very, very tough spot. I think a lot of their flying is international flying, at least on the mainline side. Obviously, they do have domestic routes, but So they're at a particular disadvantage in their route system, their route network, where the actual United Airlines flies a lot of the international routes, and a lot of their domestic routes are handled by the contracted carriers. So in this situation, the world is not opening up quickly, and so therefore those international routes aren't coming back. So they're really in a pickle. Um, Delta, obviously, you mentioned they're parking their 777s and the Mad Dogs, and dramatically reducing 757. So, but a majority of their route network is domestic. I mean, not a majority, but a lot of their route network is similar to ours, where it's domestic. So, they're really in a little better shape than United in my eyes, and for what I've read. And I think we're in about the same shape as Delta, as far as network and stuff like that. Where obviously we do have international routes, and we do make a lot of money on that. But a lot of our domestic routes are handled by our the mainline stuff. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that I feel confident with natural attrition and with these voluntary leave of absences that you and I will not have to, go on unemployment or be furloughed.
Fingers crossed, my friend.
Yeah, I'm pretty confident. And like you mentioned earlier with the TSA reports, trending in the upward direction, cities starting opening up, and businesses starting to do more business, which topic for another story, which I don't feel the government should have ever restricted any company from doing business in this day and age.
Yeah.
But as the companies are able to do business, and people are actually go out and make money and feed their families, and pay their employees, I think people are going to, like you see it now, flights are starting to get full with the ones that we have. So which would, the more full they get, see, that's
the more full they get. Yeah.
bad, more fuller
Yeah.
they get, the more airplanes that'll probably be required to be pulled out.
Yeah.
I think we didn't mention it, but Legacy Airline is having some of its commuters bring some planes out of storage.
Yeah, I saw Miami
which,
started up again with reduced capacity, but still, I mean, this is great
So,
for our regional
it's great
brothers and
news.
sisters out there. This is
Exactly.
crucial. I mean,
Yeah.
we see this kind of week by week, day by day. We see how it reacts to our progression in our journeys as aviators. And I hope what we're trying to convey here today on this episode is that there's a lot of information out there. It really does depend on how you intake it. You can make it a positive or a negative. Just kind of take it all with a grain of salt. Know that there is a future here. The airlines are going to bounce back. We are traveling people. We are a traveling species. It's going to happen. It might not look the same, but maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it'll be better. I really do see that in a 2-3 year projection, we're going to be stronger in many ways. And even our president thinks that the airlines are going to be just fine. I was actually watching a report on one of the layovers, and President Trump was meeting with Colorado Governor Jared Polis and North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum on Wednesday. And he was quoted as saying that the airlines, even though they're at a 98% drop in capacity, they're in good shape. And I have a little bit of that right here.
How do you increase the confidence in the American public to go travel on America's airlines right now?
They have great confidence, and they have great confidence in us, and they have great confidence in the airlines. We've saved the airlines with $25 billion and another $25 billion, and we have airlines that are now in good shape. I mean, they're going to pick up with the fares and with the seats. But the airline industry is in good shape. We've been able to save the airline industry, which would have been devastating if that happened. So they're in good shape. Thank you very much.
So,
Yeah.
this is from a
Good clip.
Newsweek article that reported on this. And they mentioned in there that the industry analysts are likely to disagree with the president's assessment. Stocks have plummeted due to the pandemic. Many experts have said that a number of the airlines could be forced to go out of business, and the industry might require years to recover from the damages brought on by the health crisis. With that said, again, grain of salt, because are the airlines all going to go out of business? Probably not. There are those that have already shuttered their doors. We've talked about that on previous shows, and I'm sure there's going to be more in the years to come. I'm sure that there'll be a few that coming out of this will have to restructure, declare some kind of bankruptcy or reorganization to come out of this. And we might even see more mergers and acquisitions out of this.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a recovery. We are a growing population on this planet, and we do have a very small world connected by air travel. So not to worry. The president seems to think that he saved us and everything's great with this bailout. And although that 25 billion in loans and 25 billion in grants is absolutely what is keeping you and I employed right now.
Yeah. It's a big investment in the airlines from the government, so it's in the government's best interest that we do not fold, because look how many, like you mentioned it before a couple episodes ago, look how many people are employed by the airlines. So, that would be just a big burden on the government if people were to go unemployed. So I don't know, just from an uneducated business person over here, I think it'd be detrimental to the country, to the federal government, if a major airline were to go under.
Yeah.
So
we
I
don't
think
really talk
they're gonna let
about
it.
how many people are involved, but let's just talk about what a 98% drop of the bookings, from a few months ago to now. What does that entail? So, okay, we know that airplanes are parked, flights are not happening. And that means, flight crew, flight attendants, pilots, gate agents, okay, maybe they're not working as much, okay? Or they're out of a job. And let's just stick to the aviation industry for this argument. Who else is affected? You have all the other contracts, maintenance employees, you have airport operations, you have airport fuelers, aircraft fuelers, linemen, you have all the people loading bags, catering services that are contracted out, sky chefs, and all the other companies that produce the food that we used to serve on the airplanes. I mean, all this stuff. The cleaning crew also.
Cleaning, supplies,
everything.
and all that.
The facilities electricians, the airport police are still in effect, but do you think they need as many? Probably not. All these departments, all of these factors, and we're only scratching the surface here with how many people are involved with just your local international airport and even the small airports as well. So the airline industry really has always been a mirror image of how we are doing in the economy. When the economy suffers, the airlines suffer. And all of those industries that are related, connected, and really a symbiotic relationship here with each other, we're all connected. So when you close an airport, shut down an airline, completely reduce your flying by 98%, you are making a huge sacrifice to the economy of whatever city or county you're in. So it behooves our economic staying power to keep airplanes flying, to keep the jobs going, to keep people traveling, because the more we can stimulate airline travel, I believe, the more we can stimulate our economy.
Amen, brother.
Roger, what do you have an assessment you'd like to share with us?
Oh, I don't know. I think that it's going to take a long time for all of this to come back. It's not a simplistic thing.
No.
It's multifaceted. We don't understand so much of what's happening, and there are just so many questions and which leads to so many unknowns that it's really hard. I mean, you can put one person to talk about it, you could put a group of 200 people to talk about it, and in the end, no one really knows where all of this is going. I think that the most important thing is to just know that no matter what industry you're in, is that there is another side to this.
Yeah.
I think that that fear plays a big part in almost everything. Mask shaming. I mean, that's fear. That's fear based. I mean, because of all the unknowns, either the airlines are in a tough spot. I do not think that we're going to get out of this without any furloughs. I don't think that that's in the cards now. You played the clip of Trump. That kind of flies directly in the face of the CEO of Boeing, who I think it was just last week predicted that one of the major airlines was going to go out of business. Now, depending on how you want to classify major, is that one of the legacy airlines? I would probably say no.
I believe he was commenting, at least it's speculated that he was commenting on legacy airlines, because legacy airlines has a bigger debt to income ratio
right now,
with all of the fleet modernization that they're going through. And when directly confronted on that, he denied, that he meant that company. He was just speaking in general terms, but he might be right. But Boeing doesn't have a lot of credibility right now in the market either. So.
And obviously, we're at the highest risk right now out of all of the majors. Legacy
I think that
because of debt.
It's not necessary, because I think what he had said, and I only follow this. Granted, I only follow this to a certain degree, because I think that when I watch too much, I know that when I follow the news too much, it can put you into a pretty deep dark hole.
Yeah,
I'm pretty fortunate in my situation that I'm my job security doesn't seem to be very much at risk right now. But even with all this stuff, it's still, I believe that for most people can put you in a deep dark hole, and so I choose not to watch it. But what I'd seen is he had said major airline. What is the definition of major? I don't think he's talking about the big three. I think that those, that the big three airlines are probably not, you guys were just talking about debt ratios and all that, and which is all good. I still think that probably the legacy airlines as a big three group will probably be okay. You got the mid-tier airlines. I don't know enough about the economics or the financials of JetBlue, and I think Southwest is probably going to be okay, because they are so they've been around for so long and are so heavily domestic, which will be the first thing to come back. But you got JetBlue and you've got Alaska Airlines, the combination of Alaska and the Virgin.
A lot of people forget about like Sun Country.
And
Minneapolis,
Sun Country, I know they've done a lot of work doing a lot of cargo stuff, but and Miami International, kind of on the same page as Sun Country, they did go out of business already. But one of those big airlines that we think about, whether that's JetBlue or Alaska, Southwest, those mid-tier airlines, which again I don't put Southwest in it so much, are they at risk? And then the job losses that will come along with that because of everything that you guys are talking about. In the end, perception is everything except reality. What people see or perceive doesn't mean that that's actually what's real. And the real aspect of this is that this is bad. Does it look like it's getting better? Sure, it does look like it's getting better. I think that summer, because of the way viruses work, will probably be better. But if you look at previous pandemics, specifically the 1918 Spanish flu, we are probably going to have a second outbreak. And if it follows the pattern like it did 100 years ago, it was worse than the first. And then the fear is going to take hold again. And then all bets become that you just throw them out the window again. There is another side to this. We do come through this, but what it looks like and what it's going to look like between now and then, you're just throwing things to see what sticks.
We really are. And your, observation of it is, I think, spot on. We really don't know. We don't know how it's going to come up. And these little minuscule microsecond advances that we're getting and that the news is reporting, like there's a CNN business report that just came out, and I'll put the information in the show notes, but the CEO of Southwest said, hey, people are flying again, sort of. And all that he meant was, for the first time in weeks, Americans are booking more flights than they're canceling.
Yep.
Okay.
I read that.
Is that a win?
Well, and at the same time, when you look at that, people are getting upset about that, which is something else that, I could go off on a complete upset tangent on is like, what do people want? And I think it comes back to fear. Is like, well, there's too many people on my airplane. What do you mean there's too many people on your airplane? Southwest CEO is happy because flying's coming back, and the general public gets upset because there's too many people on their airplane. Yeah.
And that's why
There's
this
always
kind
net
of
jets.
posturing of,
Well,
hey,
and and that's kind of one of those things, airlines don't fly for an
Cessna
individual.
has a few airplanes for sale.
Like the expectation that the airlines are flying for you to be the only person on the airplane, that's completely unrealistic.
We're in it to make money.
And even if you want to be upset at the corporate evils or how much money they're making, they're losing money. It's like, if you want to fly the only person on your airplane, go buy your own airplane, go call NetJets.
Yep.
Like you cannot possibly get on the airplane right now and expect to have, I digress with this whole 50%
fewer
middle seat.
air flights than people that are going to fly. They're flying now on fewer air flights, and therefore the flights will go out 85% full,
so that
if possible.
Hopefully the government and the taxpayers don't need to give another $25 billion to keep the airlines afloat. Like things just don't operate by magic without money. And to get upset because there's too many people on your airplane, you have a choice to fly or not.
Return to gates have gone up at Legacy Airlines. Return to RTGs, return to gate, which is you've pushed off the gate, the jet bridge has been pulled, you've left, and now you've got
for passenger
because
nuttiness?
Of passenger. And so we have been told, and I know other airlines have been told, and there are plenty of news articles out there on the subject, that though every airline in the U.S. right now is requiring that passengers wear the face mask during the boarding process, if they elect to remove their mask while the flight is in progress, the flight attendants are there to inform and plead, but not to enforce. And therefore, when a passenger decides, I can't breathe with this thing, which is understandable, they take it off. Hopefully they don't have anybody next to them, but if they do and they take it off and now there's a confrontation, guess what happens? If you're not in the air yet and there's a confrontation and the people around him go, get this guy out of here. The solution is this: no harm, no foul. We go back to the gate as long as it hasn't escalated. You can get off the airplane and rebook, and we won't, hold that against you. And the return to gates, the percentage has gone up a lot. At least at our airline that I know of. And then those people are asked to come off the airplane and we'll rebook you because you elected not to wear the mask. And that's fine. If you don't want to wear the mask, we're not going to make you do that. But know that now you've inconvenienced everyone. This is going to create problems. It does not constitute a security threat unless it escalates to the point of a physical altercation, which gets into security sensitive information, which we won't talk about, but it's happening. It's happening. Yep. And people have to understand, if you're on an air flight, you're deciding to go on a trip today, and you're going to book a flight, and you're at the boarding gate, and you start doing a head count, and you realize this is going to be a full flight. Trust me, the gate agents will tell you that this is going to be a full flight that booked to the 85% maximum that we're doing, whatever it is. You can easily not get on that airplane and rebook. That flight might not happen for a day because of the reduction of flying, but no problem. This is going to create problems. And we've already started to see this. So I
believe the airlines are being upfront about that booking policy too, where, it's going to be 85% is now the new full. And that is to, help social distancing, and middle seats, 50%, yada, yada, yada. But if you don't feel comfortable, you can rebook one time. That's it.
Yeah. So we're going to see this more. There are other little issues that before we wrap it up today, I just wanted to briefly go over. One of the issues is, as a pilot for a major airline or for an airline in the U.S., be careful. Because we have lighter loads, we talked about the increased performance on takeoff at the beginning of the show, which is a wonderful, wonderful way to talk about performance, baby. Yeah. But what about fuel? If the plane is lighter, it requires less fuel to get up to altitude, to cruise, and to your destination. So what traditionally, let's say a flight from Phoenix to Los Angeles, might have required let's just say 11,000 pounds of fuel to get to your destination in a particular aircraft and land with enough for the minimum 45-minute reserve. In the event you need an alternate, you need also alternate fuel and holding fuel. But let's just say it's a beautiful day. You just need your 45 minutes of reserve fuel. Well, if you're a lot lighter, and we've been landing the aircraft with a landing weight that is below the charts for our landing app. So if we go into an airport, it's got a wet runway, braking action is less than good. If it's a runway that's shorter than a particular criteria dependent on the aircraft, we have to go into our EFBs, pull up a land app, plug in the numbers, how much you weigh, what are the winds, what are the degrees of winds from the runway, is it a headwind, tailwind, what is it? And if you have any of these particular criteria, you're required to run the numbers in your land app. And I've noticed that if we had like a 2-knot tailwind, okay, you got to do the land app. So get in there and you're like, well, what do we weigh? It doesn't go down. It doesn't go down that light. So we put in like, say 140,000 pounds and we're actually landing at 132,000 pounds. And we're like, well, it says we can do it at 140. So I'm sure we're fine. So,
yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
we're be careful because we're not requiring as much fuel. And of course, computer programs have computer algorithms that figure all this out and says what your release fuels should be and what your arrival fuel should be. And when you arrive at your destination on a short flight, like say Phoenix to LA, which is about an hour or less, and you're landing at a so many thousand pounds that are below what you normally land with, and it's at a point where your aircraft will issue a ECAM message saying, hey, you're low on fuel. You may not be at the minimum fuel to declare an emergency or a fuel emergency, 30 minutes of reserve, which, hey, if you get 30 minutes or less of fuel anticipated at landing, it's an emergency. Required declaration. So you're still landing with 45, 50, 55 minutes of fuel at landing. However, you're landing with so little fuel because of your weight that you might get an ECAM message or ICAS message or whatever engine and alerting, pilot alerting system that you have. So be careful with that. Not something that Roger is having to deal with because you get to dictate how much fuel you get, but when you're dealing with a dispatcher.
How do you guys fly around? Do you guys fly around with a full tank all day long, Roger?
Oh, good Lord, no. We can put 31,000 pounds of fuel on our airplane, and which is enough to go 6,000 nautical miles.
Oh, wow.
It wouldn't really make sense to, you can get 12 hours out of that airplane. But
you guys do the dynamic fueling then? So according to your weight and whatever your flight plan is, you carry what you need.
Yeah, when we just actually can ballpark it. We'll do a rough estimate. We typically do a rough estimate of 3,000 pounds an hour, which is really 3,000 pounds the first hour, and then it's actually a fair amount less. But you're always going to err way on the side of caution when you do it that way. So that's usually how we'll fuel the airplane, and depending on the cost of fuel, where we're going, whether we have better contract rates, we actually might tanker fuel, but it's very rare. Even when we went out to Hawaii a few months ago, we only had 2/3 tanks full, and that was to carry extra fuel because obviously there's nothing to do in the middle there, but otherwise we're running around 1/3 of a tank.
Gotcha. Yeah,
and that'll
sense.
Get us 1,000 miles.
Yeah. Awesome.
Well, so be careful out there, folks. Captain Ad is something that the captain can do. Is call dispatch and say, hey, let's put 900 more pounds of fuel, Captain Ad. There's some weather and bumps or whatever excuse you want to give the dispatcher, just so they can put it in there. Because the dispatcher, they get a particular percentage that they want to just take the fuel that they need for that flight, because otherwise that flight segment, which everything's tracked, by accountants and everything, that segment costs too much money because they put too much fuel. You arrived with all that fuel, and granted, they don't look at, the next segment you need to put less fuel on. They don't look at it that way. So they're doing their best to keep the operating cost as low as possible. And one way is by giving you only the fuel you need for that segment and a day VFR where you're not required with alternates and extra and hold fuel. When you land day VFR under IFR flight rules, you could have, if you have to do a go around, you might be on the vapors. So, yeah, so keep an eye on that. That's definitely something you're going to see
Yeah,
in the
definitely.
months to come. Last topic of the day, distance learning. So what is distance learning? We've talked about recurrent training. We talked about currencies. We talked about, going in for your type ratings and sim events, but we haven't really talked about what distance learning is. And most 121 operators involve, and most 135 operators as well, involve some kind of distance recurrent training. And every quarter over at Legacy, we are assigned distance learning. Usually it takes 4 or 5 hours to go through all of these modules that they have on our electronic flight bag, our tablet, our iPad. And usually what you do is you download them and you go through the topics, and you have the computer voice that tells you, what you're learning about, which is so exciting to listen to the computer say, and in
Oh,
the
man.
Airbus, we have 1.2. Yeah. And so you're trying to just muscle through, stay awake. I'm not a Red Bull kind of guy, but 3-4 cups of coffee later.
Yep,
And
for sure.
so what do we do? And Rob, you and I both just finished a distance learning module
Yeah.
for quarter 2. What can you tell me about how your experience with your distance learning went?
It was well, there was nothing really to it. Sit and listen and answer the questions at the end, which are usually 1 or 2 questions. Um, Pretty straightforward. The thing that I actually like about it is that they do briefly touch on some of the new changes that have gone on in some of our company manuals. And so it's nice to get, for me, more of an audible introduction to that stuff, rather than just going in and reading it, which, obviously we're supposed to do that too. But at least it uh, kind of highlights some of the stuff that have been changed in our manuals. And so I get a kick out of that. And there recently there was a new program that was added to the 737 um, app list for the EFB, and basically it was an FMS. I forget what the name of it is. I obviously have to go back to school and learn what the name of it is. But it's basically an FMS app, and in our in the 737 that we fly, the software version, you there's very limited ways to figure out if you changed altitudes or change routings, how that will benefit your flight as far as fuel and time and stuff like that. So this app is in our EFB, and it
Yeah,
actually uses the
FMS
actual flight
Plus.
data.
Yeah,
Thank
we
you,
have it
thank you. I
too.
knew it had an FMS in
Yeah,
it.
FMS
Okay,
Plus.
so you guys use it too. So it's
Mhm.
really neat to use. I mean, obviously, it's better for the longer flights and stuff like that. And the stuff that I've been doing lately, it doesn't even come into play because you're by the time you get up to altitude, you're descending already. So, but yeah, the stuff like that was kind of neat to see it presented in an educational format where you can actually learn a little bit from. So I didn't have to go in and read about it and try to figure it out myself.
Yeah.
Um, Other than that, it's kind of redundant stuff. You just the information is just going over the stuff that you would normally go through in a 121 check ride environment. Where you're doing a close parallel, instrument approach procedures, and high altitude aerodynamics and stuff that's good to obviously good to have refresher on. But so a lot of it's very repetitive from the last time you heard it. But anyway, that's my experience. I kind of, when I get the email that it's time to do the quarterly stuff,
Mhm.
um, I'm kind of a go getter. I'll go ahead and download it right away and just try to get out of the way right away,
Yeah.
because I'll tend to forget, and then I'll see the email. Oh, it's almost time to make sure you have it done because the quarter's almost over.
Right.
So I'm like, ah.
I know
So
guys, they
anyway,
don't even look at it until they get the email going, you have 24 hours left to complete your distance learning.
exactly. Yeah,
Because
and
if
I
you
have a
don't,
friend just like that.
you're no longer qualified and you get removed from the line, and you get a
Exactly.
phone call from the chief pilot going, What the hell, dude?
Not only that, my buddy's emailing me, texting me, "Hey, how do we sign back into the app again?" Are you kidding me?
And of course, 24 hours prior to when it's due, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Again, my password's
Yeah,
not working. Call
Like,
ID.
dude.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. That FMS Plus trainer was new for us as well on the bus. And basically, once you push off the gate, you're up at altitude. You were planned at 38,000 foot flight, and your ATC tells you your altitude is going to be 28,000 feet today for traffic, for weather, for bumps. And you're like, oh, okay. So you could try to go through and text dispatch through the ACARS system, which is not the easiest thing to do when you have a little tiny keyboard and a little screen, and you're limited to how many lines you can put in there. So what you can do is you pull up this FMS Plus app, and from what I understand, you can plug in the variables, and it'll basically do what the dispatchers traditionally do on their computer.
Exactly.
It'll run the numbers. It'll give you what your speed should be and what your fuel burn is going to be and your anticipated arrival fuel and all that. Now, mind you, even though this has been out for a little bit and the training is now, in this quarterly program, now the company can go, well, you've been trained. You should be using it.
Yeah,
Don't bother our
exactly.
dispatchers with this stuff. They're busy. So, but I've always seen, I don't even have to let them know we're leveled at 28,000 feet because the aircraft tells on you. The aircraft is constantly communicating with SOC, systems operation control, constantly. I mean, you overspeed this airplane by 2 knots on some parameter that's a limitation. Trust me, they know about it before you figured it out in the airplane.
Telemetry. They know.
Yeah. So they know that, okay, you've just adjusted your cruise altitude and your FMS to 28,000 feet. That's 10,000 below what your plan was. And before you even get a chance to type a message saying, hey, ATC is giving us 280, what's our new fuel? You're already getting the numbers for the fuel burn coming up on your ACARS system on the printer. Yeah.
Pretty neat. And I think also, too, they have less airplanes to track, too. So they're a little more focused on
right now.
the planes that are in the air.
Yeah, right now.
Sure.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt, but this is something that also for training or, if you guys coming into the airlines or flying different airplanes, this software that they have is, obviously something in addition to what we use now. But, the newer airplanes, I think a lot of that stuff is built into the FMS. I know for a fact when I was on the 175 and flying it as a check airman, that was a built-in software feature to the FMC.
Oh.
So they actually had a page called the What If page. And so when you go into the What If page, you could actually build routes, change your speeds, change your altitudes, and it would give you all that information in the What If page. And the cool thing about it was if you liked what you did, you just click select activate and it would do it. So that was I think and it's a Honeywell software thing too. So I think it's just that was probably in the 175, the current, the newer, probably whatever 3rd, 4th generation FMC stuff. So I think what seems like what they try to do is use that app to supplement the older software stuff, so to make it more user friendly and current and less task saturated for dispatchers and stuff like that.
Yeah,
so I don't know
exactly.
That's
knowledge is power. The more things you have to know, the
brother.
more you can screw it all up. Well, that wraps up episode 42 of Squawk Ident. Want to take a moment from all of us here at Squawk Ident to thank the frontline workers, doctors, nurses, pharmacists, EMTs, medical techs, firefighters, law enforcement, grocery store employees, truck drivers, Amazon workers, and of course, all the airline employees that show up to work every day to provide the essential services that they do. I feel we are finally kind of over this hump of the minimum flying and the damage that's being done to not just our industry, but the economy around the world. And we're starting to see a little bit of normality coming up. Are you enjoying Squawk Ident? We truly do hope so. Please visit our website at www.aviatortony.com. That's Alpha, Victor, the number 8, Romeo, Tango, Oscar, November, Yankee.com. And there you can check out episode cover art, episode archives, photos from the flight line, the pilot shop with cool Squawk Ident gear, and you can leave comments and audio feedback as well. You can contribute to the show right there on the homepage, and you can help us with equipment marketing expenses by becoming a producer of Squawk Ident, either with a one-time or recurring contribution. And a big uber thank you to our newest producer of Squawk Ident. My hat's off to you, Captain Ryan Rosinski, for your generous contribution. Facebook and Instagram users can search Squawk Ident Podcast, and Twitter and YouTube users can search Aviator Tony and Squawk Ident to follow on the socials. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, it would really help us out if you would just take a moment to leave us a review and share the podcast with some friends. One final thank you to Roger and Rob for joining me on today's adventure on episode 42. I do hope that you guys had as much fun as I did. I know talking to you guys every week about the industry that we love and the journey in aviation has always been something I look forward to. And, you know, hopefully we can keep this good thing going for years to come.
Yeah, it's been great. Thanks for having us, Tony. It's a good time.
Thanks, Tony. Yeah, it's awesome. I'm glad we get to share this with our listeners and talk about aviation-related stuff and stuff going on in our lives with our listeners. So thanks for having us on.
And thank you to all of you that are out there that are taking the time to listen to this grateful aviator, those grateful aviators, and for all of you out there that are flying, keep the dirty side down, be safe, and take care of each other.